It was September 1939, cold, gray, and heavy with a silence that felt unnatural. 18-year-old Leon Köhler, a quiet farm boy from Bavaria, stood inside the wooden barracks of his training camp. The walls smelled of damp wood and metal oil, and the air was filled with the sound of marching boots outside. Leon never wanted to be a soldier. He wanted to work on his father's farm, take care of the cattle, and maybe become a mechanic someday. But when the draft notice came, his family knew he had no choice. He looked down at the stiff, itchy gray uniform in his hands. It didn't feel like clothing. It felt like a contract he never agreed to, a promise to fight a war he didn't understand. As he buttoned the tunic, he stared at himself in the cracked mirror. The face staring back wasn't a warrior. It was a boy pretending to be one. Outside, a whistle blew sharply. "Recruit Köhler, fall in," the sergeant barked. Leon stepped out into the cold morning, the sound of his heartbeat louder than the gunfire drills in the distance. He could feel his old life slipping away with every step, and deep inside he wondered, would he ever see his home again? Leon quickly learned that training camp wasn't meant to prepare boys. It was meant to break them. The winter of 1940 came early, and the Bavarian mountains turned white with unforgiving cold. Every morning before sunrise, the recruits were dragged out of their bunks and forced into the frozen yard, breath turning into clouds as they lined up. "You are not boys anymore," the sergeant shouted. "The fatherland needs warriors, not cowards." The drills were brutal. They ran for miles through snow so deep it swallowed their boots. They crawled under barbed wire until their elbows bled. They fired their rifles until their shoulders bruised purple. Leon's hands, once used to soft farm work, were now cracked and bleeding from endless weapon drills. His fingers ached so much at night he could barely sleep. Sometimes he wrapped them with cloth ripped from his own blanket, so no one would notice. But even harder than the physical pain was what they were forced to become. Recruits were ordered to shout, obey, never question. Any sign of hesitation meant punishment. Any sign of fear meant humiliation. Leon watched boys younger than him collapse from exhaustion. Some fainted. One was beaten for lack of discipline. Leon kept a quiet promise to himself. "I will survive. I will not break." One night, after hours of punishment drills in the snow, he sat alone behind the barracks with trembling hands. He looked up at the sky, dark, endless, uncaring, and whispered, "Just let me go home someday, please." But war doesn't negotiate with prayers. Training wasn't molding him into a soldier. It was turning him into something colder, something harder, something he wasn't sure he recognized anymore. And soon, with the thunder of war growing louder in the distance, Leon's real battle was about to begin. Leon had imagined war 1,000 times during training, but nothing prepared him for what awaited beyond the Polish border. It was June 1941, and the air trembled with the roar of engines. Operation Barbarossa had begun. Leon's unit marched east through endless fields, their boots kicking up dust that soon mixed with the smell of oil, sweat, and fear. For days, nothing happened. Villages passed by like ghosts. Windows shattered, livestock wandering freely, roads littered with abandoned carts. It felt like war had already consumed everything before they arrived. But on the 7th day, reality struck. Hard. The ambush. It happened at dawn. The fog lay thick and silver across the tree line. Birds were silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Leon walked in the middle of the formation, rifle tight, heart hammering. Then, crack! A sniper's shot tore through the air. The soldier ahead of Leon dropped instantly, face first into the mud. No scream, no movement. "Ambush! Take cover!" The lieutenant roared. Chaos exploded. Russian machine guns opened fire from hidden trenches. Bullets cut through the fog like angry sparks. Leon dove behind a fallen tree, mud splashing across his face. His hands shook violently as he loaded his rifle. Training flashed through his mind. Breathe, aim, squeeze. He peeked over the log. A muzzle flash. Another shot. Leon pulled the trigger without thinking. The recoil slammed back into his shoulder. He didn't know if he hit anyone. He didn't care. He just wanted to survive. The screams of war. Explosions tore open the earth. Trees splintered into flying wooden shrapnel. Screams echoed everywhere, German and Russian both, blending into a nightmarish chorus that Leon knew he would never forget. A wounded soldier crawled toward him, clutching a shredded leg. "Leon, help me, please." Leon grabbed him under the arms and dragged him to a ditch while bullets ripped the ground around them. "Stay with me, stay with me," Leon shouted, but the man didn't. His eyes glassed over before they reached cover. Leon froze. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His stomach twisted violently. This wasn't glory. This wasn't honor. This was hell. The push forward. The lieutenant ordered a counterattack. Leon's group advanced through smoke and fire, stepping over bodies, every nerve wired with terror. At one point, he found himself face to face with a Russian soldier behind a burning cart. Both froze. Both raised their rifles at the same time. Leon fired first. The young Russian fell backward, disappearing into the grass. Leon's legs nearly buckled. He was someone's son, just like me, someone who didn't choose this. But war didn't pause for grief. The enemy lines finally broke. The ambush ended. Silence returned. Heavy, suffocating, unnatural. The surviving Germans gathered, trembling, faces pale. The lieutenant nodded grimly. "Get used to it. This is only the beginning." Winter came early in 1941, a merciless frost that settled over the Eastern Front like a steel shroud. For Leon Köhler, this was no longer about training or small ambushes. This was survival in its rawest, cruelest form. The snow stretched endlessly, white and blinding. Every step was a battle. Feet numb, boots frozen stiff, breath crystallizing before it even left their lips. The wind cut like knives, driving into exposed skin, and every man marched with a grim determination. Move, survive, repeat. The long march. Leon's unit had been ordered to reinforce a strategic village near the front lines. Supplies were scarce. Food was meager. Ammunition was rationed. Every man carried his life on his back, in the shape of weapons, winter coats, and the few possessions they had left. He watched as comrades stumbled, their faces pale, lips blue. One young recruit fell behind and vanished silently into the white abyss of the forest. They never saw him again. Leon gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Every snow-covered hill felt like a mountain. Every frozen tree seemed to whisper threats. The first frostbite. By mid-March, Leon felt a sharp pain in his toes. Looking down, he saw his boots soaked with frozen snow, toes turning black. The medic shook his head solemnly. "You're lucky to keep walking," he said. "Most don't make it this far without losing fingers or toes." Leon swallowed the fear. He wrapped his toes with strips of cloth. Each step was agony, but he kept moving. The frost didn't care for courage. It didn't care for bravery. It simply claimed the weak and punished the unprepared. Morale in the white wasteland. Around him, men whispered prayers, muttered curses, and tried to keep spirits alive. Klaus, his longtime friend, hummed an old folk song under his breath. a small act of rebellion against the emptiness surrounding them. Leon smiled faintly. It was the first warmth he had felt in days, though the frostbitten pain in his toes reminded him how fragile life had become. Ah, the attack in the frost. Suddenly, the distant crack of rifles shattered the silence. Soviet scouts had detected their movement. Ambush. Men dived for cover. Snow exploded into clouds of powder with every shot. Leon fired rapidly, each pull of the trigger a desperate prayer. Bullets whistled past his ears. Snow turned red in places where men fell. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about glory. It was about not becoming another frozen body in the forest. Ah, nightfall and reflection. Night came, long and silent. The temperature plummeted further. Soldiers huddled together for warmth. Some sobbed quietly. Others stared at the sky, numb. Leon sat with Klaus beside a dim fire, their faces etched with exhaustion. He looked at the stars shimmering above the snow-covered forest and whispered, "I never asked for this. I never wanted this. But I will survive. I must survive." By 1942, the Eastern Front had become a living nightmare. The quiet boy from Bavaria, once dreaming of machines and engines, was now a hardened soldier. Leon Köhler had seen frostbite, starvation, and fear, but nothing compared to what awaited in the ruins of a once peaceful village. The unit marched through early morning fog. Smoke already rose from distant chimneys, burning wooden roofs and shattered walls. Civilians had fled, leaving belongings behind. Some had been caught in the crossfire. Some had been executed. Leon's stomach churned. He had been told war demanded sacrifice, but he had never imagined it demanded this level of horror. Ah, the first sight of destruction. As they entered the village square, flames danced across broken homes. Chickens ran through the rubble, bleating in confusion. Smoke burned their eyes. The smell of burning wood and human suffering mixed into a thick haze. Leon crouched behind a ruined wall, rifle ready. He could hear shouting, orders in German, cries in Russian, and terrified screams of those caught in the chaos. The lieutenant barked, "Move forward. Secure the streets. We hold the village at all costs." Leon obeyed, but every step felt like walking through the graveyard of his own morality. Ah, close combat. Suddenly, a Soviet soldier appeared behind the remains of a burnt cart. Gunfire erupted. Leon fired instinctively. The man fell. No time to think. No time to grieve. The battle raged street by street. Buildings exploded as artillery shells landed. Soldiers fell. Leon dragged a wounded comrade into the shadow of a collapsed wall, feeling the warmth of blood and the cold bite of fear on his hands. Every street, every corner, every doorway became a trap. The village itself seemed alive, conspiring against him, each ruined roof hiding another threat. Ah, the human cost. Amid the firefight, Leon saw the faces of those he had sworn to protect, villagers caught between armies, innocent children pressed into basements, staring with wide, frightened eyes. He felt a spark of rebellion in his chest. He would survive, but he would also try to save those he could. Leon pulled a terrified boy from the rubble, carrying him to safety, even as bullets tore through the walls around them. The boy clung to him, shivering. For the first time, Leon felt the bitter weight of responsibility that wasn't about orders or strategy. It was about life itself. Ah, loss and resolve. By nightfall, the village was mostly destroyed. Flames crackled across broken homes. Soldiers counted their dead, while survivors huddled in cellars, too terrified to move. Leon sat against a crumbling wall, rifle across his lap, eyes wide and haunted. Klaus sat beside him, silent, smoke curling around his face. "I didn't ask for this," Leon whispered. "I don't want to be part of this." But deep inside, he already knew. War demanded choices he could never unmake, and the boy who had once fixed radios in a quiet village was gone. Winter had returned with a vengeance. The landscape was a frozen wasteland, and the Eastern Front had become a graveyard for those unprepared, for both man and nature. Leon Köhler and his unit were ordered to cross a partially frozen river to flank an enemy. Position, a mission. That was as much about survival as it was about strategy. The river was wide, its icy surface cracking under the weight of boots and artillery. The wind cut through uniforms, biting fingers and faces exposed to the elements. Every step required caution. One misstep could mean falling into the freezing water, leaving a soldier to drown or freeze within minutes. The treachery of nature. Leon led the way, scanning the riverbanks for weak ice and hidden currents. Shouts from behind told him the men were struggling to keep balance. Snow soaked their feet, frost creeping up legs and toes. A sudden crack echoed across the river. Ice splintered under the weight of a soldier behind Leon. He lunged, grabbing the man just before he fell into the icy water. Heart pounding, he hauled him to safety, feeling the bite of frost and terror in every muscle. It was not enemy fire, not strategy, that killed men here. It was the relentless winter, indifferent and merciless. The weight of responsibility. Leon's eyes scanned the line of exhausted soldiers. Each man depended on the other. One slip, one frozen limb, one misjudged step, and they would all suffer. He barked instructions, steadying those faltering. Keep moving, one step at a time. Despite his own numb toes and frostbitten fingers, he helped the weakest soldiers across, throwing ropes, lending strength where it was needed most. Through the night, under the dim light of a half-moon reflecting off the icy water, they crossed, every man alive, every man shaken. The emotional toll. Once across, Leon collapsed behind a snow-covered embankment. His uniform was soaked and frozen. His hands trembled uncontrollably. The fire from a small camp stove barely warmed his fingers. He thought of his family back in Bavaria, of his mother and sister, wondering if he would ever see them again. In the bitter cold, one truth became clear. Survival required courage, cunning, and the will to keep going even when hope seemed lost. Leon knew the battles ahead would only get worse. The Eastern Front was unending, brutal, and unforgiving, and he, now tempered by frost, fire, and blood, was ready to face whatever came next. By late 1942, the Eastern Front had become a world of mud, blood, and relentless misery. The summer thaw had transformed forests and fields into rivers of mud, swallowing boots, equipment, and sometimes men entirely. Leon Köhler and his unit were ordered to advance through a partially flooded forest to intercept a Soviet supply route. The sun was hidden behind thick clouds, casting everything in a dull gray light. Trees, blackened and leafless from constant shelling, loomed like specters. Water lapped at the knees of soldiers as they trudged through the frozen swamp, each step sucking their boots deeper into the muck. The terror of every step, every movement was perilous. Hidden trenches, sharp debris, and sunken tree roots made it impossible to move quietly. Enemy snipers and patrols were everywhere. One wrong step could mean a bullet or drowning in the icy water. Leon led his squad forward, rifle in hand, eyes scanning constantly. Around him, men whispered prayers. Others muttered curses. The water soaked through their boots and uniforms, chilling them to the bone. Suddenly, a hidden machine gun opened fire. Bullets zipped past their heads, tearing through mud and water. Shouts, screams, and the splash of bodies in water turned the forest into a hellish nightmare. Leon dove behind a fallen tree, dragging a wounded soldier with him. Blood mixed with mud, freezing instantly on their skin. He gritted his teeth and fired blindly into the tree line, each pull of the trigger a desperate bid to survive. The strain of survival. Hours passed like days. Exhaustion, hunger, and fear gnawed at the men. Leon felt the weight of command more acutely than ever. Every life in his squad rested on his decisions, his focus, his instinct. A moment's hesitation could mean death. One young recruit, no older than Leon when he first enlisted, began to collapse. His strength gone, he was pulled forward by his comrades, shivering violently. Leon wrapped his arms around him, steadying him, whispering encouragement, even as his own body screamed from the cold and fatigue. "Keep moving. Just one step at a time," Leon murmured. He realized that the war wasn't just about battles. It was about endurance, about keeping humanity alive amidst the madness. The night of desperation. Night fell without mercy. The gray forest became a black labyrinth of shadows. The sound of water dripping, boots squelching, and distant gunfire was constant. Leon found a shallow hollow to rest his men. He sat alone for a moment, rifle across his knees, staring at the black water around him. Memories of home, of Bavaria, of quiet fields and laughter haunted him. The boy who once repaired radios and dreamed of life beyond the farm seemed like a ghost, yet something in him burned, a stubborn flame of survival, of resistance, of hope, even in the mud, the cold, the gunfire. Leon felt himself harden. He had crossed frozen rivers, fought ambushes, and faced death. By the winter of 1943, the Eastern Front had become a frozen graveyard. The forests, fields, and villages were nothing more than shattered landscapes, scarred by artillery, fire, and endless death. Leon Köhler, once a boy from a peaceful Bavarian village, now moved through this chaos like a shadow, tired, haunted, but unbroken. The roar of artillery was constant, echoing across frozen plains. Snow mixed with ash and debris, coating every soldier in gray-white grime. Leon's unit had been ordered to hold a critical position near a bombed-out town. Retreat was impossible. Advance was certain death. The barrage. As they arrived, the first shells landed. The ground shook violently under the impact. Buildings collapsed, sending clouds of brick and stone into the air. Men screamed. Horses, abandoned and terrified, galloped blindly through the ruins. Leon dove behind the remnants of a wall, mud and blood coating his uniform. He grabbed a comrade, pulling him to safety as shells burst overhead. Every heartbeat was synchronized with the war, louder, faster, relentless. "Hold the line," shouted the lieutenant. "We cannot give ground." Leon obeyed, moving from cover to cover, firing, shouting, dragging wounded men to safety, ignoring the numbness spreading through his body. The cost of command. Hours passed like weeks. By now, Leon's fingers were frostbitten, lips chapped, and eyes red from snow, smoke, and exhaustion. Every life that fell around him weighed heavily. Every scream echoed in his mind. One soldier, barely 19, fell near him. Leon tried to drag him to cover, but the man's blood was already freezing on his uniform. Stay with me," Leon whispered, his own voice breaking. The Eastern Front was a machine that demanded sacrifices of every kind, and Leon realized painfully that survival meant making impossible decisions, saving some, losing others, all while maintaining the thin line between humanity and the monster war demanded them to become. The night of fury. Night came without mercy. The wind howled through shattered streets, carrying with it the smell of smoke, burnt timber, and the unending odor of death. The soldiers huddled where they could, trying to rest, trying to preserve warmth, trying to maintain sanity. Leon sat against the remains of a collapsed building. His hands shook from exhaustion and cold. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of those who had fallen. The boy he tried to save in the village, the sniper in the forest, the friend dragged from the frozen river. Yet he pressed on. Even in despair, he found a spark, a determination that burned brighter than the fires around him. The human spirit in war. By dawn, Leon's unit was still intact, barely. They had held the line, surviving the storm of iron that had shattered men and buildings alike. Leon's face was smeared with dirt and soot, eyes haunted yet resolute. He had learned more than tactics, more. By the autumn of 1943, the Eastern Front had become a ghost land. Smoke rose constantly from ruined villages. Rivers of mud swallowed everything in their path, and the echo of artillery never ceased. Leon Köhler, now a veteran soldier, moved with a grim precision, every step measured, every breath calculated. The boy, who had once dreamed of repairing radios, was gone. In his place was a man tempered by frost, fire, and blood. His eyes carried the weight of months of death. His hands knew the cold of rivers, the heat of explosions, and the tremors of bodies around him. The village ambush. Leon's unit was ordered to secure a village that had been a strategic crossroads for months. What awaited them was more than resistance. It was a trap. As they entered the shattered streets, Soviet soldiers emerged from hidden trenches, sniper rifles lining every roof. Shells slammed into walls, sending clouds of brick and debris into the air. Chaos erupted immediately. Leon ducked behind a collapsed building. His rifle spat fire into the shadows, each pull of the trigger a mixture of instinct and desperation. The screams of his comrades echoed in the empty streets. A sudden explosion threw him to the ground. Mud and ash filled his mouth and eyes. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but he forced himself to move. Every step forward was a battle against both the enemy and the environment. The village, like the war itself, offered no mercy. The human cost. Leon saw friends fall, some without warning, some in slow agony. The young recruit who had once clung to him during river crossings was now gone, his face pale, frozen in fear. Yet, amidst the carnage, Leon acted. He pulled a wounded comrade into the shadow of a crumbling wall, administered first aid as bullets whizzed past. He carried messages across open streets, guided men through hidden alleys, and ensured that the few who remained alive could survive the night. Each decision weighed heavily. Each moment could mean life or death, not just for him, but for every man under his command. The night of desperation. Night fell, but it brought no relief. Snow began to fall lightly, covering the blood-stained streets with a thin layer of white, mocking the destruction below. Leon huddled in the remains of a cellar, the walls trembling under distant artillery fire. Around him, exhausted men whispered prayers or sat in silent despair. Some sobbed quietly. Some stared blankly at the walls. Leon's thoughts drifted to home, to Bavaria, to the radio he had once repaired, to the quiet mornings with his mother and sister. Those memories felt like another life, unreachable and distant. He clenched his teeth and whispered, "I will survive. I will endure. I must." Because survival had become more than instinct. It had become purpose. By 1944, The war had consumed everything Leon Köhler had ever known. His youth, innocence, and dreams had been stripped away, replaced by the harsh realities of battle, loss, and survival. Cities were rubble, forests were graves, and every step forward carried the memory of friends lost. Villages burned, and the constant whisper of death. Leon walked through the ruins of a once thriving town in the east. Smoke curled from shattered buildings, the air thick with dust, and the acrid stench of burning wood and metal. He paused for a moment, rifle in hand, surveying the devastation. This was not glory. This was not honor. This was war stripped to its bones. Chaos, survival, and loss. The final battle. The unit had been ordered to hold the last strategic crossroads against an advancing Soviet force. Leon and the remaining soldiers dug into the rubble, preparing for what seemed like certain death. Artillery shells screamed overhead, crashing into walls and sending showers of bricks and debris. Gunfire rang out constantly. Every man knew that this battle could be their last. Leon moved from cover to cover, shouting orders, rallying the men, dragging wounded soldiers to safety. The snow, now mixed with ash and blood, coated everything, making the ground treacherous and slippery. A sudden explosion threw him into a ruined wall. Pain shot through his side, but he forced himself up, pushing past the agony. Around him, comrades fell. He counted them silently, each one a weight pressing on his soul. The cost of survival. By midday, half of Leon's unit had been lost. Exhaustion, frostbite, and relentless enemy fire had claimed them. The rest pressed on, moving forward not because of orders, but because survival had become instinct. Leon stumbled upon a group of civilians trapped in a partially collapsed building. Women and children huddled together, terrified. Without hesitation, he ordered a small detachment to cover them, pulling them from the rubble. For a moment, Leon felt the spark of his old self. The boy who had wanted to protect, to fix, to save. But reality returned swiftly. A shell exploded nearby. Dust and shrapnel blinded him. He shielded the civilians, sustaining injuries himself. He could feel blood trickling down his temple, mixing with dirt. The emotional burden. As night fell, Leon sat among the ruins, staring at the silhouettes of destroyed buildings and the faint glow of fires in the distance. He thought of Bavaria, of the farm he would never return to, of the family he might never see again. He whispered to the wind, "I survived, but at what cost?" He had endured frost, fire, ambushes, starvation, and fear. He had killed to live, saved to survive, and watched countless others die. Every choice had left a mark on him, each one a scar on his soul. The final reflection. The war did not end with heroism or glory for Leon. It ended with survival, with the heavy burden of memory and conscience. He stood among the ruins, rifle in hand, looking at the horizon. The smoke, the ash, the endless echoes of gunfire had become his world. Yet within him burned a stubborn flame, humanity, resilience, and the will to endure. Leon realized something crucial. Survival was not enough. Life demanded reflection, morality, and hope. The boy from Bavaria, who had once dreamed of engines and quiet mornings, had become a soldier, shaped by the worst of humanity, but still capable of compassion. He took a deep breath, the cold air biting at his lungs, and stepped forward. The war had taken everything, but it could not take his spirit to persevere, his will to live, or the memory of what it meant to be human. And so Leon Köhler walked on, carrying the scars, the memories, and the lessons of a war that had changed him forever.